Hello, this is going to be lesson number 1 on polynomials. But before we can do the lesson, we need to do some definitions about polynomials. So we're going to start out by explaining what is a polynomial. Polynomial is anything with numbers and letters. Okay, so for example, here I have examples of different types of polynomials. Okay, and a polynomial is made out of terms. Like for example here, this is one term and this will be another term. So then in other words, this here has two terms. This guy here has three terms. This guy here has 1, 2, 3, 4 terms. These two guys over here has only one term. Okay. The thing that separates a polynomial one term from the next is the positive or negative signs. Okay. Also, polynomials can have special names. For example, if I have only one term, I can call this a monomial. If it has two terms, I can call it binomial. It's just like if you speak two languages, you are bilingual. Here, if you have two terms, you can call it binomial. If you have three terms, it's going to be trinomial. And if it has four or more, you can call it polynomial. Okay, all of them are polynomial. It's just that these three over here have special names. Okay, so here I go through some of the definitions excuse me, of polynomials. For example, the word monomial is a number or product of numbers and variables with whole numbers as exponents. So here I have different numbers, different examples of monomials. They only have one term. Then the formal definition of polynomial is either a monomial or the sum and difference of monomials. So for example, I could have a monomial, and that's a polynomial, or it could be the sum of monomials, or also the difference. So let's say I have 3x squared. So these are all examples of a polynomial. Okay. When we talk about the degree of a polynomial, that will be the greatest. That will be given by the term with the greatest degree. Okay. So we need to, first of all, we need to talk about degree. The degree of a polynomial is the biggest exponent. Okay, so in other words, the degree of this polynomial would be number 2. Okay, for example, on our previous problem over here, what is my degree? My degree would be x to the 5th, because that's my biggest exponent. Okay, a polynomial with one variable is in standard form when its terms are written in descending order or degree. So what is standard order? Standard order means that the exponents are written from the biggest exponent down to the smallest. So if you look over here on this example here, this is not in standard form because the biggest exponent is right here. So if I was going to rewrite this in standard form, I will start it out with my biggest exponent, which is x to the 5th. Then my second biggest exponent would be 4x to the 2nd. Then it would be negative 5x, and I ended with a number without x. Okay, so now this would be in standard form because it's going from the biggest down to the smallest exponent. Okay, now let's now talk about leading coefficient. Leading coefficient is the number in front of the first term when the polynomial is written in standard form. So once you put them in standard form, the number in front of the letter with the biggest exponent will be your leading coefficient. So in this problem here, what's my leading coefficient? The leading coefficient would be number 1. Okay. Over here, when I look at this is in standard form because it goes 3, 2, I'm sorry, I'm pointing and you cannot see. Let me repeat that. Okay. Here, this is in standard form, so excuse me. This is a standard form because the exponents are going down from the biggest down to the smallest. So the leading coefficient would be the number in front of the variable with the biggest exponent. So in this case, the leading coefficient is 5. Okay? Also, let's remember degree is your biggest exponent, so the biggest exponent here is 3. Okay? Alright. We already talked a little bit about this, but there's two ways to classify a polynomial. We talked about this right here. We can classify a polynomial by the number of its terms. Okay? So for example, all of these are polynomials that only have one term, so it's called monomial. All of these are polynomials that has two terms, so it's called binomial. This over here is a polynomial that has three terms, so it will be trinomial. And like I said before, if you have 4 or more terms, it's called a polynomial. Okay? Now there's another way to classify polynomials, and it's by its degree. So basically remember, degree is the biggest exponent. So for example, here are some examples of polynomials. And here, my biggest exponent, remember, even though you cannot see a letter, there is an x to the 0 here. Okay? And I'm sorry. There's no x to the 0. There's no exponent there, so that means this is a constant. Here there's an exponent, is 1, so this would be linear. Exponent 2, this would be quadratic. 3, cubic. 4, quartic. And 5, quintic. Okay? This basically, I'm showing it to you. We oftentimes we use these words. We rarely use these words. Okay? So just remember that if you have x to the third is cubic, x squared is quadratic, x to the first is linear, and if there's no x, it's constant. Okay? Alright? Alright. So, basically now, let's suppose I have this problem right here, which says, rewrite each polynomial in standard form. Then identify the leading coefficient, degree, number of terms, name of polynomials by terms, and by degree. So let's see. First thing I need to do is write in standard form. So standard form means from the biggest exponents down to the smallest. So the biggest term here with the biggest exponent will be negative 5x to the second. Then would come 4x. And the last one would be positive 3. Now, next thing is to identify the leading coefficient. Once it's in standard form, the leading coefficient is the number in front of the letter with the biggest exponent. So in this case, the leading coefficient is negative 5. Then it says the degree. The degree is the biggest exponent, so the degree is 2. The number of terms. The number of terms is 1, 2, 3. And then the name of the polynomial by the terms. There's 3 terms, so it would be trinomial. And the last thing is by degree, because this is a square, so then it would be quadratic. Okay? Alright, next one. This over here. This over here, I need to put in standard form, so the biggest exponent would be 8x to the 4th. Then the next one would be plus 3x squared. And then the last one would be negative 4. Then the problem asks us to identify the leading coefficient. The leading coefficient would be 8. Then it says the degree. The degree is the biggest exponent, so the biggest exponent is number 4. And the number of terms, we have 3 terms, so it would be 3. So the name of the polynomial by the terms would be trinomial again. and the name by degree would be, because it's to the fourth power, quartic. Okay? Alright, I want to go back and just correct a little bit because I made a mistake here. Here there is an x, it would be x to the 0 power. And x to the 0 power is 1, so negative 9 times 1 is negative 9. Okay? So yes, there is x to the 0, but it's multiplying here. X to the 0 becomes 1, negative 9 times 1 is negative 9. Okay? But usually we don't write it the x to the 0. So that's why you just see a number without x. Alright, very well. These are some of the definitions of polynomials, okay, before we can start lesson number 1. Just to recap, okay, polynomial can have many names depending on the terms, okay. So if you have 3 terms, it is trinomial. If it has 2 terms, it is binomial. 1 term, monomial. If you have 4 or more, it will be called polynomial, okay. Again, standard form means you put the terms in order from the biggest exponent down to the smallest. Once you have that in order, it's very easy to identify the leading coefficient because it will be right here leading the pack. Or in other words, the leading coefficient is the number in front of the biggest exponent here. Or the number in front of the letter with the biggest exponent. Okay, then we talked about degree. Degree is your biggest exponent. We also talk about number of terms, how they're being separated by either a positive sign or a negative sign. So here I have 1, 2, 3 terms. We also talk about how to name the polynomials, either by terms, right, using this, or by degrees. Okay, this is not so important. I would consider this more important because this is how we mostly refer them, okay, throughout the course. Okay. We do use these once in a while, and we rarely use these two. Okay. All right. So now we're ready to go to our lesson number 1. Let's add and subtract polynomials. Basically, what we have here, we're going to add or subtract, and we're going to write our answer in standard form. Okay. So basically, here I have parentheses. So the first thing that we need to do is get rid of the parentheses. So I'm going to just write down positive 3, negative 2x squared. Since there's nothing in front of it, I can just get rid of the parentheses. But over here, I need to apply the negative sign. So if I apply the negative sign, this would be negative x squared. Negative times a positive is negative 6. Negative times a negative is a positive. Now I can combine like terms. And because I want in standard form, I'm going to start out with the biggest exponent. The biggest exponent is x squared. And since I have 2 terms, I'm going to combine it, and I'm going to get negative 3x squared. Now, next on the answer here would be a number with x. And since over here I only have 1 term with x, I'm just going to bring it down. And the next one would be numbers without x. And because I have 2 of them, then I combine them, and this would be negative 3. Okay, so that would be my answer. Now let's go on to the next problem. Again, I have parentheses here, so let's get rid of them. Since I have no number in front of this parenthesis, I can just get rid of the parentheses. Now on this one, I need to apply the negative sign to each term. So this would be negative 15x squared minus 3x. Negative and negative becomes up positive. And now that I have that, let's combine like terms. And I want to start out with x cubed because that's my biggest exponent. And because there's nothing that have x cubed other than this 5, I'm just going to bring it down. Then the next one on the answer is going to be x to the 2nd power. And this time I have 2 terms that have x squared. So let's combine it. So this would be negative 9x squared. Get rid of those. Next one on the answer is going to be a number with x. And because I only have 1 term with x, just going to bring it down. And the last thing would be numbers without x. So in this case, I have 12 and 2, so that will be positive 14. And that is my answer. Okay, so this concludes lesson number 1. Thank you very much for your time, and have a great day.